Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock, your host. Happy Thursday. So glad you're able to join me here in my home. Fantastic show planned for you today. LeBron James sat down with Pat McAfee for an hour, a little more than an hour yesterday. We're going to talk about it. It was a very interesting interview. We'll play shorter excerpts of the interview. TJ Moe and I will have a discussion about it, our thoughts, kind of off the top of our head, and then we'll mix in some small sound bites from LeBron so you get a flavor for what happened. Maybe many of you have already watched it for yourself. Have you seen the highlights and clips? We'll talk about that. And then in the second half of the show, we'll talk about the civil war going on in conservative media, and we'll do it with our Blaze colleague, Auron MacIntyre. He will join us. Auron's one of the smartest people I know on just in the conservative media space and the Christian and the based media base. He is brilliant, and I can't wait to get his take on what's been going on with Jeremy Boring and the Daily Wire, what's been going on with their president. I believe John Lewis steps aside. There's rumors about a financial collapse of the Daily Wire. I think a lot of that speaks to an overall reshaping of the conservative media space. And so TJ and I will talk about it a little bit. Auron and I and TJ will talk about it a little bit. So stay tuned for all that. But before I get into this LeBron James conversation, you guys know our mission here at Fearless. You know what we're about. We're about saving babies' lives. We're about supporting the organization that we know does the best job of saving babies' lives, and that is Preborn. Preborn offers expectant mothers who are considering abortion an ultrasound, a sonogram. They introduce the heartbeat of the baby, an image of the baby in the mother's womb. Now that expectant mother is more than twice as likely to choose life, and that's where Preborn really steps in and supports that expectant mother for up to 2 years of that baby's life inside and outside of the womb. Preborn is amazing. The money that we send to Preborn, it's not wasted on middle management. It's not wasted on executives and summer homes. It goes for paying for ultrasounds. It goes for diapers. It goes for helping mothers and babies. There's 2 ways to give. Pound 250, say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, keyword baby. Or give the way that I prefer to give by going to preborn.com/fearless. That's preborn.com/fearless. Gentlemen and ladies, this is a part of our mission here at Fearless. Saving babies' lives. Our partnership with Preborn is vitally important. It's your best way of showing love to me, to the world, to God, to babies, to expectant mothers. Preborn.com/fearless. Pound 250, say the keyword baby. All right, let's get into this conversation with LeBron James. And we'll start with just one of the clips of LeBron and Pat McAfee talking about, and this clip is LeBron talking about how the decision, kind of made him a victim. People were looking to pick on him. Let's play that clip, and this one may be one of the longer clips we play, just to give you a flavor for the conversation and a flavor of LeBron's mindset. And then TJ and I will just have a conversation back and forth about the entire conversation. Let's play clip 1.
You probably lost a lot of trust in media, I would assume, because of the things that happened. Not just what was said on TV, but what it led other people to probably think they should say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
right?
It all started with the decision. The decision really had me sit back and because people literally I give a moment. So the decision, it was brought to me to be able to, do something cool on TV, do a kind of college style. And like I said, never went to college. I was like, this would be pretty cool.
Put a hat on.
Make the decision, put the hat on, but also, raise $2.5 million for a great cause, and also be able to, make it cool. And the funniest thing is, from that moment, it was December 2nd, 2010 was my first game back to Cleveland. So I stay at the hotel, stay at the Ritz downtown in Cleveland. And this one I knew that it was, people did not even really care or didn't even understand the situation. They just wanted to be a part of the nonsense. I hit the elevator to go downstairs to the bus, catch the bus, to go over to, I think it was the Q, the Quicken Loans Arena then. And the elevator opens, and it's two guys, random guys on the elevator. You guys can always pull this up. They used to have these FUKLBJ T-shirts, black T-shirts, red letters. And I see the two guys, they see me, they say, oh my God. Oh, no, listen, this is, man, we love you so much, man. We're just here for the spectacle, man. We're just here for the spectacle. Like, seriously, we love you, man, and have a good get. And the elevator door closed. I was like,
those are two white dudes, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it because we're outnumbered right now.
Now we're all this together, brother. We're all this together,
it was like,
brother.
oh my God, man, we love you, man. Like, oh shit, don't. And the elevator closed. I was like, you know what? This is all part of the spectacle, and it's about to get haywire.
So the decision, you think, is whenever the conversation kind of changed a little bit about you?
Yeah, because they just needed something. They needed something. Everything was so positive, and and I gave them no reason to make it negative.
It wasn't fucking up.
But they needed anything. I'm doing everything I need to do on the court. I'm not out in the streets. I'm not being caught in all the bullshit that doesn't respect the game and respect my craft. It was like, oh, you decided to go on TV and make a decision for your career. Oh, we got you. We got it. We finally got it. We finally made a little chink in the armor.
We got something.
We got something.
It's selfish.
Oh, it's selfish. Yeah. You selfish mother. Yeah.
And then that caught a little bit of fire, right? Because a lot of people don't like seeing people that are successful in anything, especially if somebody is taking happiness from them and their team, which you were doing, obviously, with the Cavs. And then that just got, you're saying from that moment is when. Yeah.
So that was somewhat early in his conversation with Pat McAfee, TJ. And it was LeBron somewhat framing himself as a bit of a victim. I think you believe that more strongly than I do. I think that LeBron's overall appearance on Pat McAfee, he was trying desperately hard to be likable. And I'm not sure if he pulled it off. I think he wanted to come off as one of the guys and, hey, I'm the type of guy Pat McAfee could have a beer with, and you sports bros out there, you could have a beer with. But, I don't think he pulled it off because, one, I thought he cursed way too much. He was too profane. And over, even though I thought he had the right energy, I think if you examined his message throughout this interview, it undermined the likability.
I certainly didn't like him anymore after watching it. I think he's got several different problems, and we'll get to this throughout the conversation, but I think the guy's a billionaire, okay? Or at least he's got a lifetime contract with Nike that eventually is going to pay him an obscene amount of money. He's not a victim. He's never been a victim for his entire life. I guess he grew up in the hood, according to him. I'll take his word for it, whatever. He moved his mom out of the hood. He told us in this interview the second he signed a $90 million contract with Nike as a high schooler, okay? He was moving into the NBA. So what other 18-year-old has that opportunity to sign a $90 million contract for doing nothing but playing basketball? And again, it's great talent and all that, but it's like you're not going to war. You haven't started a big company. You're a very talented athlete that hasn't proven anything outside of high school yet, and they gave you $90 million. You've never been a victim ever at any point in your entire life. And so trying to say, as you go into talking about the decision, and that, I'd never had any problems. I wasn't out there in the street. I'd never really left Cleveland. Even in Cleveland, I didn't live in Cleveland. I lived in Akron. And so they just had to find something, and that was their thing to find. And, he tried to go into talking about how, I raised millions of dollars, $2.5 million for charity. And it was like my high school, college moment where I get to pick the hat and all that. It's like, hey, man, this whole thing, you're not, he's 40 years old. How old is LeBron? He's
41, I think.
41.
40 or 41.
You're a 41-year-old man who is now coming on one of the most popular shows on television to tell us that you were a victim back then, and they've been trying to get you since that moment. How is that likable in any way?
It's not, but let me push back and ask you this question. LeBron's never been a victim. People are sitting there, he didn't know his father. his mother had substance abuse problems or some problems early on. He grew, from age 0 to 12 or 14 or whatever. He was poor, they would say. And so didn't know his father. Not knowing his father, that's not his fault. Doesn't that make him some sort of a victim?
Well, then we're all victim of something, right? If you have a dad in the home but he's got anger problems, are you a victim of that? If you have a mother that would prefer to work a job a little bit more so she's not at home, are you a victim of neglect? We can all paint this idea of victimhood. The reality is when you are, since the time you were 18 years old, been a guy that has had every single person take care of every one of your problems forever. He's never been in any trouble, as far as we know, but he's been the golden child who, if he had gotten any trouble, we would likely never know about it. The Akron police, the attorneys and people around him, politicians, everybody loves LeBron James. How would we even know if he was ever crossing the line? It's very unlikely. So, in my view, he's the opposite of the victim. He is one of the, not only the most gifted, again, that was given by God. You can't tell me with that sort of gift that he's been giving that he's any sort of victim. Certainly not from God himself, okay?
Yeah.
He's one of the most privileged people to ever exist. So I'll never buy the victimhood narrative, and he can't sell it. He's trying. He's still 41 years old.
I agree with you that it's impossible to sell the victimhood narrative when you've been a multi-millionaire longer than you were ever poor. And so let's say at 18 he gets that contract and he's now 40 plus. He's been rich far longer than he's been poor. And the reality is, and everybody knows this if they apply any common sense, LeBron was rich before that Nike contract in terms of the number of grown men and businessmen and people that discovered him at age 12 and were like, hey, we just got to take advantage of this guy's athleticism and get him through high school so he can get this Nike contract and NBA contract. And so he's been taken care of by a group of adults pouring into him at least since he was 12, probably started when he was 10. Mm-hmm. People recognize this sort of athletic talent very early on, and they get involved with trying to help that person. And so LeBron's had a lot of help for a long time. He's not someone that was, neglected forever. And so I agree with you. The other thing where I thought other examples that just stuck out with me where I thought he undermined himself in terms of being likable, because I think the NBA wanted him on Pat McAfee Show. I think he was instructed to, hey, this is the kind of interview it's going to be, and we're going to put you in a good light, and we're going to make people like you, because people don't like the NBA right now. They don't like the players. And LeBron knows he's coming towards the end of his career, and he's not well-liked because of his son and all that, the way he's handled that, and just some of the other political stuff he's gotten involved in. But there were just shots and jabs at people throughout this interview. And I'm not sure if everybody caught them, but I know the people that took the jabs caught them. He took a shot at Bob Cousy and everybody that played in the previous generation. And the thing that's been trending all over social media is him saying Giannis Antetokounmpo would have scored 250 points in the 60s and 70s. That's a shot at everybody in that generation. Do you know how bad you guys were? Giannis Antetokounmpo would have scored 250 points. And they also know what LeBron is really saying is, and I would have scored 400. And Wilt Chamberlain's dead, Bill Russell's dead, but whoever's alive from that generation, from the 60s, and the guys that are definitely still alive since the 70s, like, he's calling us barbecue chicken. That's Shaq's word. He's calling us trash, and these guys would have, he thinks Giannis Antetokounmpo is 10 times better than Wilt Chamberlain. And it's just not factually true. That was a shot. Bob Cousy is only good for his era.
You trying to tell me Giannis wouldn't be able to play an NBA game in the 70s?
I think
handshake. He wouldn't be able to do it.
Giannis,
neither would you. Neither would you.
Giannis Antetokounmpo would have 250 points in a game in the 70s.
Those are the shots, TJ, that I thought undermined him coming off as super likable.
Yeah, I truly don't think. I mean, I totally agree that was the point of it. And I'll end this with a question because there wasn't a single moment where I thought, oh, this is why people like LeBron. He is a normal dude. There wasn't a single moment. Maybe you did in the end. I'll ask you at the end. But I mean, he went from subject to subject, basically walking around with his LeBron superiority. Of course, I would have made it any, and then played the victim even while he's saying that. You know, there's these people out there who say, LeBron, he could never play in the old time. It's like, man, I could play in any. Who are these people, LeBron? Who's saying that you couldn't play in any era? What? People might say that about Steph Curry because he's tiny and he might break. People might have said it about Steve Nash. I've never heard anybody say it about a guy who's 6'9", 260 pounds. I've never heard it. Who's saying this? So he plays the victim at the same time, like he's taking some sort of unbelievable criticism that's never happened in the history of media. They targeted it on LeBron James because he's this guy. He's the golden child. He's been the victim. It's all a lie. So he would play the superiority and the victim at the same time. I'm the victim. By the way, everybody knows I would have dominated everywhere I went. By the way, you guys don't know how to podcast. Let me show you how to podcast. Everything he did was to play the victim and then say, but really, I'm the one who knows. The guy who's only high school educated, never went to high school, never went to college, probably didn't go to too much high school, to be honest with you. This guy is the one who knows how to do everything. I do my acting, I do my podcasting. I just got to show people how to do it because this isn't how you talk about basketball. Even he attacked some other NBA players where he was talking about, even guys, they just played off physical ability, not me. I think the game. He went into that later. Where he's talking. The whole thing is just talking about LeBron's superiority, how smart I am, how I can think the game, how I can do the podcasting. And these other people, they're all just too stupid and couldn't figure it out. That's why I didn't like him.
Pat McAfee played along with all of it. And I know that was probably his job. And look, he's got LeBron on. At some point I saw there were 90,000 live concurrent. So It's a big show, and he doesn't want to rock the boat. But he pushed back on none of it. Not even, because I think there was a polite way. Because, like, when you're having a real conversation with your bros, there's going to be some pushback. There's going to be like, oh, come on, man. You really? 250 points?
Yep.
Come on. Man, you think Will Chamberlain, he's going to score 250 points on Will Chamberlain? There was a way to do it politely and respect. But clearly that wasn't allowed, or Pat McAfee didn't feel comfortable, or Pat McAfee thinks that LeBron knows so much more about basketball. How could he be wrong? But this is where it just felt inauthentic to me, that there should have been some pushback. I don't have a friend that doesn't push back against things that they think I say that they think are stupid.
Pat was his hype man. He stoked the fire on several of these things because even when LeBron was talking, I believe it was part of the conversation where LeBron was saying, these people say LeBron couldn't play, and Pat jumped in and said, yeah, you couldn't take a foul from, I don't know if it was Charles Oakley or they brought him in a different part of the conversation, but at one point they said, yeah, you couldn't take a foul from this guy, LeBron. Like, he's stoking the fire of the stupidity, which I don't think of it. Pat, I think at his heart, and part of what makes him so likable, he's a bit of an antagonist, and he completely abandoned that during this interview. And look, maybe he's in on the deal. Maybe it was LeBron's reps that reached out, explained the whole thing to him, and said, hey, we got to make LeBron likable. I didn't think Pat did a very good job. I didn't think LeBron was there a single moment, I know you listened to the whole interview, that you thought, LeBron looks relatable here?
You're asking the wrong guy, because in the audience kind of knows me. LeBron's a secular leftist. It may be impossible for me in the current LeBron.
Man, and again, you told us this just last week, so you tell me if I'm wrong on this. But you said, I'll tell you if I'm too biased to even see the reality here. I don't think that's true here. I think you've called balls and strikes. And for instance, Pat McAfee's not your type of guy. I think he's very likely, to some degree, a secular leftist, even though he's cast as a conservative. But boy, does he look relatable a lot of the time. and that's why it works. And you tell the truth about that.
I do, and what I saw and what I reacted to was LeBron was trying to be one of the guys. And so even though I think he failed, I'm giving him credit for making the effort. That's the best he could do. He lives in such a bubble, and people worship him so much, and everybody around him is dependent on him financially. And then he's not self-aware enough because he doesn't seem to have any relationship with his true father, the one in heaven. He doesn't legalize and invite people to bring him into a level of self-awareness. And so the thing I liked about that interview, even though it failed, he tried to be likable. He tried to be relatable. He knew that he needed to come off slightly different than the normal LeBron. He made an effort. It wasn't good. He took shots at people unnecessarily to make points. The way he unpacked being a role model, and he wanted to give himself credit for being a role model, and he framed it as, and then there was these people that didn't want to be role models and didn't want to, and I took it on because I wanted to be a role model. That was a shot at Charles Barkley.
Absolutely.
He doesn't like Charles Barkley. Barkley occasionally is critical, and Barkley's a Jordan guy. It was a shot at Charles Barkley, but also, again, it's like something that some people will be sitting there nodding, yeah, LeBron, he's kept his nose clean. He hasn't been in trouble. He's taken on trying to be a role model, and they'll buy it. I didn't buy it because I'm like, this man is sitting up here talking about what a role model he is while cursing every 25 to 30 seconds. And it's like, oh, yeah, he's in it for the kids and he wants to be a role model, but I'm going to come on this platform and drop F-bombs and MFs and damn and F. I mean, it was just nonstop.
Yep.
And I was like, the contradictions and the lack of self-awareness that I think I would suffer from too if at 18 they dumped $70 million on me to hawk basketball shoes, and that ever since I was 12 years old, everybody catered to me because they could tell where I was headed. Everybody knows I love Jeff George. We grew up together. We're friends to this day. I was a part of the process of handling Jeff George with kid gloves since he was a child because we knew how talented he was and we liked him and we knew what he could do for us and we knew what was ahead of him. And so we all just made sure. And then, obviously Jeff George on a scale of 1 to 10 is a 10 talent. Me as a 6.5 talent, I got catered to and treated, and people at my high school loved me and let me get away with things that I shouldn't have gotten away with. Yep. And so LeBron has dealt with that his entire life, and so it erodes self-awareness, and I'm sympathetic. But so, again, he made an effort.
Follow-up question.
Yeah.
Does he deserve credit for likely being instructed by the NBA that, hey, man, you're obviously the face of this thing. You're the only one that can do it. Our league is absolutely tanking. Your legacy's going with it. We set this thing up. Can you just try to be likable? Do you really deserve a lot of credit for going on a show? Completely failing entirely. Like everything you just talked about. He played the victim. He played his LeBron superiority card. He went on a show that's really all about humor and like hanging with the boys, and it's such a mismatch because he's not funny at all. LeBron's never made me smile during this entire interview. It's not just because I don't like him. I actually was a LeBron fan until he went to Miami. I had a LeBron jersey when I was a kid. Like I was a big fan of. But the guy's just not funny. It's not in his DNA. It's not who he is. And then he goes on a bro show where all they do is sit around and laugh, and it's a mismatch. So none of that worked. He didn't, like his attempt at sitting down and trying to be one of the boys, likely instructed by the NBA, that was his idea because the league is failing and everybody knows it, which is why you have Adam Silver going out on Colin Cowherd's show talking about moving the three-point line back. I mean, they're doing everything they can to solve this. Their NBA All-Star weekend, a disaster. You had Magic Johnson just this week come out and say that he didn't watch a second of it, everybody knows that the house is on fire. And so they push him out there and say, please fix this. And then he failed miserably. Does he deserve credit for that?
Yeah, because he could have said no. He could have said, no, I'm good. I got my $1 billion. My son is starting to play, and people are backing up off their criticism. I'm good. I've done all I can. He could have said no, and he could have. And so I'm grading LeBron on a real hard curve.
Yes, you are.
And he's lowered my expectations to a point that, yes, just the fact that he made an effort. Yes, he failed. I want to play you this clip, but this is another just like, why are you taking this shot? Why take a shot at Brian Windhorst here? Let's play that.
I see a lot of shit too. Like I seen Brian Windhorst on one of these shows not too long ago. Like
Wendy.
Yeah, you played over high school.
Wendy, you guys played together in high school.
Yeah,
right? He was on your high
yeah,
school
this
team.
guy was like, says he's like my best friend. These guys are just weird. But
Brian Windhorst has never claimed to be LeBron James's best friend. Never. He's claimed that, hey, I covered LeBron in high school, and I used to communicate with LeBron early in his NBA career, late in his high school career. He's never pretended to be Brian Windhorst's or LeBron's best friend. LeBron used that word like best friend, or he pretended about. This seems so unsettling to score with Windhorst and trying to. I got to make it clear I don't like Brian Windhorst, and I want you guys to dislike Brian Windhorst. His shots at Stephen A. Smith, I understood. They're in some little public feud. I get it. Now, I have to admit, his shots at Stephen A. Smith, the way he handled that conversation, made me sympathetic towards Stephen A. Smith. Mm-hmm. But the Windhorst thing just seemed like this is from out of nowhere at someone who's never done any harm to you. Why take that shot?
I don't know the backstory, so all this could totally be wrong. It's pure speculation. But is it possible that LeBron, first of all, failing at trying to be one of the guys, just sort of saying things off the cuff and whatever, that's part of it. But the second part is, if this is to be true, does he have some resentment that Brian Windhorst only has any popularity at all because he rode the LeBron train, he covered LeBron, and so his entire career has been made off of LeBron, and then has he become critical? Has he said some other things at some point that he's like, this dude is only here because of me, and now this is what he's turned into?
I think he has the wrong read on Brian Windhorst's career. Yes, being associated with LeBron helped Windhorst get in the door. But Brian Windhorst is a very good reporter. Mm-hmm. Used to be a very good writer. I don't know how much writing he does now. But Windhorst is one of the best guys covering the NBA, and that happens in terms of, hey, Bill Simmons becomes a big superstar sports writer because the Patriots dynasty is so good, because the Celtics won championships, because the Boston Red Sox won championships, and he just happened to be in Boston, and his brand was built around Boston, and he got to.
Didn't Greenberg get bigger because of the Jordan years? Mike Greenberg?
Not that I remember, no. But Ahmad Rashad certainly participated, and everybody participated. But that's life, and that's LeBron's taking too much credit, and just that's the wrong. Windhorst has been harmless as it relates to LeBron.
I like Windhorst.
Never tried to harm him in any way. Windhorst is great, and I have a bias because I don't want to get Windhorst in trouble, so I'll just leave it alone. I don't want people; they'll be protesting.
Don't you think that's what he thinks, though? That to me is what it came off. That's what LeBron
thinks. Everyone and
narcissist,
but also maybe cowardly, because if you really wanted to go there, why go at Windhorst? Why not go at Skip Bayless? That's who rode LeBron's coattail to millions and millions of dollars is Skip Bayless. Go scorched earth on Skip Bayless, but he's
irrelevant today. We'd probably be sitting here having a conversation. Why are you going at Skip? Skip's sitting here, no relevant. You wouldn't now after what you said 2 weeks ago, but 3 weeks ago before you had that epiphany, you'd be saying, "This dude's 80 years old."
I don't think I would be.
That's what you did with when Shannon Sharp went after him.
Yeah, but that's a whole different deal. Skip Bayless started going at LeBron at 21 years old. Mm-hmm. And I would have gotten in if he had wanted to drag Stephen A. Smith into that. that aspect. But this whole thing of I'm only upset with Stephen A. because of what he said about my son, it's inauthentic.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's not what it's about. And so go to what it's, hey, man, I ain't liked you for a long time. You got a phony basketball career. You and Skip Bayless made millions and millions of dollars off of me. I don't like you. Say that. That's what. And if McAfee and that show were authentic, and I know that McAfee probably had handcuffs on him as it relates to Stephen A. Smith, as it relates to Windhorse and all that, but it was an effort. It didn't work. But I will say this. I do think, TJ, it's playing differently on social media than it is for me and you. I think a lot of people think this was a great interview, and we've never seen LeBron like this, and he said F you, and he said if LeBron had said the N-word, social media would have melted in celebration. He just said on the Pat McAfee Show, I done died and gone to heaven. Oh, Lord, take me now.
I don't think it's true that people haven't seen him this way, though. Like, he did his barbershop show where he sat around and talked to people and tried to be this likable guy. It's not the first time he's tried this. This is just a brand building exercise for him. That's all he cares about. He's doing this podcast, which now there's in season 2 with somebody else. I forgot who it was. He did it with Reddick the first time, and what Pat McAfee called just a season-long job interview for the head coach. And now he's doing it with somebody else. And so I think he has. I think LeBron's had a lot of exposure. Maybe there's a bunch of people who've never seen LeBron in this big way, but
he talked. One of the moments where I think he talked about the chocolate chip cookie thing with Pat Riley. And he talked about Pat Riley in a more respectful manner than maybe some of these others. And like Riles is all about heat culture and that's it, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if Dwayne Wade told the chocolate chip story about Pat Riley taking LeBron's chocolate chip cookies on the plane ride back to another game. And LeBron looked, yep, that's true. And everybody knows how I am about chocolate chip cookies and all. That's on social media, people are going to eat that up and, oh, look at LeBron. And I think you and our reaction is in line with a lot of people. But there's a great segment of people that are on social media and that are just LeBron groupies and worshipers that think that LeBron sitting up being condescending and dismissive of everybody else, oh, this is great.
Tell me this. If we were to take a poll of all sports fans, people that pay attention and care about LeBron at all, where does it fall on his approval rating? Like versus dislike? What would it be?
LeBron's approval rating is 51% approve?
I was going to say 50-50. I think it's right. Yeah. So the attempt to go on and do this, I think, did absolutely nothing because the 49%, if you're correct, agree with us. And the 51% that already liked him are eating this up. And you did absolutely nothing that the NBA was trying to fix.
That's a good note to end on. LeBron accomplished nothing. There you go. We just summarized the entire interview. LeBron accomplished nothing. We'll see if we can accomplish more. We're going to talk a little about the Civil War in conservative media. We'll do that with Auron MacIntyre. X.
These words are our religion, no regrets in our decisions. We all want to go to heaven with freedom. It's my obligation, no hate, discrimination, raising up your hands for freedom.
Men, it's time to rise. Our country, our faith, our future, all under attack. I'm bringing the boldest voices to Nashville. Woke Call 3.0 is your call to action. Join me, join Tucker, and let's take a stand together. May 2nd and 3rd in Nashville. I am Jason Whitlock, your host.
Went without so that he could give you an abundant life.
Young men shall utterly fall. Jason, I know you called us to preach off, but I feel like preaching up in here right about now.
I've struggled with my health and weight loss most of my life, feeling sore, low energy, and having a hard time staying mentally sharp. But Relief Factor, it's changed all of that. I feel better. I move better. I think better. It's been a real transformation. And here's the thing, it's only $20 to try. If Relief Factor works for me, and I'm no easy case, it can work for anyone. Don't wait. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or visit relieffactor.com. All right, welcome back. We're going to change up topics and move away from the sports world and LeBron James and talk about something that I'm passionate about, I think the audience is passionate about, and it's the conservative media space. And there seems to be a civil war going on in the conservative media space, and there seems to be that maybe there's a general that's being forced into surrender. We know at least one, Jeremy Boring, the CEO of the Daily Wire. And now I believe, and TJ, help me out if I'm right, is it John Lewis, the president, that you sent me yesterday, has stepped aside at the Daily Wire? But we're going to be joined in this conversation by Auron MacIntyre, one of my colleagues at The Blaze, one of the best follows on X that you could find, one of the most based conservatives in the media space. Auron, is a paler, more researched, more clever, not as good looking as me, but he's got a lot of similarities with me. But Auron, welcome to the show. And first time we've had you on, we'd love to have you back because you can have these types of discussions with me. Auron, what do you, is there a civil war going on in the conservative media space?
I think there is a big shift happening. We saw the dynamic when Trump entered the room, and he wasn't just doing battle with the left. He was also doing battle with the established conservative movement. There was a lot of hostility towards him when he came in. And even though, because he's been kind of the figurehead of the Republican Party for so long at this point, many people have kind of aped support for him, many of them are still pretty hostile to his agenda and his voters. And as people who actually believe in Trump and his movement start to move into positions of power, both in the administration and in the media, a lot of the people who were part of the old guard are really pushing back. And so I think we're seeing several of the people who would probably still say they're aligned with Trump, or they kind of support Trump, or they're along with a lot of the things that he's doing. They're very much pushing back against the people around him, the different administration picks and the different media figures that I think ultimately represent the future of the right and kind of the way that the populist right was moving once Trump entered the space. And so I think you are seeing a number of different personalities clash, not just because it's good for Twitter and they can get these different battles, that kind of thing, but ultimately because there is a fundamental difference in the way that I think a more neoconservative approach to the right values things, as opposed to what people used to call the paleoconservative approach. I think that Trump really represents a new form of paleoconservatism, one that is more centered on America first, what is best for this country, reining in foreign policy, caring about trade deals that ultimately help the working class. This is something that the newer right, which I think is really the older right, respects. And it's something that clashes with a lot of the beliefs that the conservative establishment has espoused for a long time.
So we want to be fair and we want to be transparent and somewhat even sympathetic. And so when I transition this conversation into talking specifically about the Daily Wire, I don't want anyone to think that we're here, certainly not me, and I'm sure not Auron, trying to take cheap shots at the Daily Wire. But it is fascinating what's been going on at the Daily Wire, from Jeremy Boring's unexpected resignation or step down or giving up the CEO title to Ben Shapiro and getting some pushback on the whole Derek Chauvin, free Derek Chauvin deal, and then Ben and Matt Walsh going to it's not the State of the Union, but Trump's address in front of Congress. It seems like the Daily Wire, particularly since the exit of Candace Owens, there's a hardcore America First populist crowd that seems dissatisfied with the Daily Wire and calling them the establishment and saying they're the problem. What's your sense of that?
Yeah, I do think there are a lot of people who are looking at the different personalities at the Daily Wire and trying to figure out what is happening behind the scenes. Of course, we can speculate about all kinds of drama, interpersonal issues, those kind of things, but that's not really our point here. We're talking about the issues and the way that they're approaching the conservative movement in general. I think if you look at someone like Matt Walsh or Michael Knowles, they seem to have a different understanding of the way that America ultimately should value things and operate than someone like Ben Shapiro or Andrew Klavan. And that's not to say that those guys don't have any good ideas. Of course, they are ultimately on the right. And so they are aligned with, I think, a lot of people on a number of the issues. But in this populist moment, in this realignment with Trump and the reorientation of the conservative movement, I think it's clear that you're seeing more pushback against that from a guy like Shapiro than you are than, say Matt Walsh. And again, not entirely. It's not that Ben Shapiro is the enemy of Donald Trump at the end of the day, but there is a noticeable personality differential there. And I think the audience is responding to that. I think that in general, we're seeing conservatives be more interested in Trump forward content and opinions that ultimately follow the MAGA ideology, one that, again, is America first, values those relationships first, is looking to scale back on foreign commitments and other aspects that tended to be something that were more embraced by the conservative movement previously. And so I think not just the interpersonal stuff, but also the values difference is showing itself inside many organizations, including the Daily Wire. This is happening there, but it's not just happening there. I think we're seeing this dynamic play out across the conservative media landscape.
Well, and I think because of Trump and because of his constant drumbeat of fake news, what scared the establishment was that Trump was justifying and elevating people that had been labeled conspiracy theorists. If you think of the media space before Trump in 2015, when he just started hammering fake news, there were a lot of people that just had questions from JFK to 9/11 to anything that you could just write them off as conspiracy theorists. Don't you understand? The mainstream media has already said what this is. Well, Trump's fake news chant let people like Alex Jones get kind of reevaluated. And that in that reevaluation process, I think the audience has reevaluated its perceptions, and they have an expectation of the media. And this is where I took a lot of satisfaction in being partnered with the Blaze. Take COVID and the way that Steve Deace and others handled COVID. And it wasn't, they actually drove the narrative on that and drove suspicion of the vaccine and everything Fauci was doing. Whereas, I'm not trying to beat up the Daily Wire. I'm just talking about what happened factually in real time. They were promoting the vaccine and promoting the mainstream narrative until it became obvious that they were in the wrong spot. And so I think that I don't think the Daily Wire has caught up to the expectations of audience. And the expectation of the audience is, hey, we want you to be very suspicious of the government from the get-go. Let the government prove they're doing the right thing rather than us assuming they're doing the right thing. And that's where I've gotten in some back and forth conflict with Ben and the Daily Wire, where I can remember on October 7th, my instincts in my show was like, hey, man, this sounds terrible what's happened, but the American public and global public has been fooled so many times that, the title of our show was Conspiracy Leery or Conspiracy Weary. And it was about people are going to wait for some more information before jumping to harsh conclusions about what happened on October 7th. And I got a lot of blowback for how dare I second guess. But I think that's where the audience is. That's where the populist America First movement is. We want some proof before we believe.
I wrote a book called The Total State, and the core thesis of the book is that ultimately governments that want to stay in power, ruling elites that want to stay in power in a Western liberal democracy have to control public opinion. They have to make sure that they are mediating reality for the average voter so that they consistently perform the way that the people in charge want them to perform, rather than making decisions for themselves, evaluating information for themselves, these kind of things. And for a very long time, status in our society was really assigned by how close you were to power, how close you were to these mediating institutions. And this was even true for conservatives who recognized that ultimately they were outside looking in on the liberal establishment, but still gained a lot of their authority and their prestige by how respected they were by the establishment. And one of the big things that Trump shook up was the fact that we no longer wanted that mediation. Trump found a way to communicate with the people, break through on social media, break through in viral ways that circumvented that kind of media bias, that complete lockdown and control of our institutions when it comes to information management that the left had for a very long time. And that's really great if you're a Republican, if you're a conservative, because that means that you are circumventing all of that control. However, if you spend a lot of your time gaining authority and gaining influence because you were very close to the media establishment, because you were adjacent to a large amount of that power, and you were just kind of the Republican flavor of that, then this is a process that actually threatens you as well, because your position was gifted to you by you being located closer to power. Now, again, I don't want to say that's the situation with the Daily Wire. I think there are many hosts on the Daily Wire that ultimately do speak out against many of these institutions and push back against power. However, you can see that at least certain personalities felt like their credibility being attached to the current system was threatened by all of this questioning that was occurring. Because once we start asking questions, once we say, hey, maybe these established institutions that mediate our information, if they lie to us about COVID, maybe they'll lie to us about other things. That doesn't just throw the establishment's power into question. It also throws the power of the conservatives who are adjacent to the establishment, who drew their credibility from the establishment. It throws their power into question. And so in many ways, I think you are seeing guys like, say, Tucker Carlson, who was certainly part of a conservative media establishment, but recognized that he was ultimately limited by that and has struck out very far in another direction, as where you see others who were much more cozy and comfortable with that mediated relationship between the media and the people, and they would like to maintain it. They would just like it to shift slightly in their favor. And I think they're the ones who are sweating the most during this thing.
I think that's an excellent point. And, you know, Trump, it was already beginning to happen, the fracturing of the media, but it's as fractured as we've ever seen it now. And the Daily Wire was one of the first ones in, and they've gotten to the point, you mentioned it, Auron, where it's like, asking questions is just a little bit too far. Hey, we're just asking questions, and that means you have some sort of motive that everybody knows what it is, and why don't you just say it? But you won't say it because you're scared. That's their thought. Meanwhile, Ben Shapiro is doing things like running his own behind the paywall series called Debunked, where he basically says, I've debunked the JFK conspiracy theory. And he's done this about several different things. And I used to be a Daily Wire subscriber, have watched many of them. And it seems to me, the Daily Wire has become the new legacy media. They're sort of the old guard that says, stop asking questions. We make the rules around here. How dare you, Auron and Jason Whitlock and whoever else? Why do you think you get to ask these questions? And they put pressure on and seem to be suggesting that you're anti-Semitic or you have ulterior motives to even be asking these questions, not to find the truth. Who would ever want to find the truth? The idea is you're trying to create chaos and demonize a certain group of people. And that seems like this seems to me why the audience is turning against them.
I think without question, and Auron, I want to ask you a follow-up that's related to what TJ, but also related to what you just said. You brought up Tucker Carlson, who everybody here knows I'm friends with, so I'm obvious. Perhaps I have some bias, but I love where Tucker Carlson has gone as an independent. I love his faith journey and how he's incorporated that into his political worldview. Obviously, I'm doing an event with Tucker here in Nashville, so everyone knows my biases. What could you expound on your thoughts on just this new version of Tucker Carlson where he seems to be getting in once a month trouble for interviewing the wrong person.
Yeah, and this was already happening at Fox News, which is why you could feel that chasm widening between him and the establishment. But Tucker Carlson has basically decided that he's going to ask the obvious questions, the questions that I think pretty much all conservatives had in the back of their mind, but couldn't understand why there was this cognitive dissonance, why we never resolved these contradictions inside the conservative movement. For instance, for my entire life, I heard from conservatives that church was important, family was important, community was important. At the same time, I heard from conservatives, well, we don't care if if the economic system destroys your community, rips out your jobs, makes it impossible for you to afford a home as a young person. That's just creative destruction. That's just the way that things work. Now, I'm a capitalist as much as the next guy, but capitalism isn't a suicide pact. It's there to serve the good of the people. If it ends up making lives better for Americans, then it's good. And if it doesn't, it's bad. It's not a religion. It's simply the best system we have at the time, and that's why we use it. And I think the fact that Tucker Carlson is willing to ask these questions, do we have to constantly go to war with Russia? Do we have to constantly say that no matter what, we have to send money or troops to some cause for Israel? Do we have to do that when it comes to our economic system? Is trade something that we just can never question? I think these are issues that Tucker is willing to address, and he's willing to interview people who have different opinions on it. Now, I certainly do not subscribe to every opinion that has been voiced on the Tucker Carlson show, but we're allowed to have conversations about these things. We're allowed to explore these issues. We're allowed to decide whether or not our current ideological structure is aligned with the well-being of the United States and its people. And I think that's ultimately why Tucker has maintained an audience and why they have followed him to his new platform, and why I think other people in that vein are gaining influence and gaining voices, because, again, many people want to actually conserve the United States. They don't want to talk about conservatism. They don't want to label themselves conservative. They would like to look at the traditions, the culture, the way of being that is embodied by the American spirit and the American people, and they would like to see that protected economically, militarily, spiritually, across the board. And Tucker is willing to have those conversations. Maybe he doesn't get it right all the time, but people see that genuine willingness to pursue these questions. It's the same kind of thing that people admire in Joe Rogan, though in a very different way, but a similar spirit. And it's that authenticity that the left has not been able to manufacture. They're complaining about the podcast problem, right? Why they can't keep up with the conservative movement. At the same time, it seems like a lot of people in the conservative movement are trying to kill the thing that the left is trying to copy, saying, oh man, no, we're too authentic. We're asking too many questions. The conversations are too real. We have to get it all back under control. And I just think that's a huge mistake, because you're literally watching the left implode because they can't be honest, because they can't ask these questions, because they can't pursue these things. You want to know what a woman is? We're canceling you. You want to know why we don't want to go to war all the time? Is it okay if we maybe stop going to war every few years in the United States? Shut up. We're canceling you. You probably hate groups of people. That's the kind of response we're seeing. And I think in both ways, it's a mistake.
Auron, you're nailing it. I want to throw something out to both of you. Auron first, and then TJ chime in if you have a thought. This is an original thought. I think it's an original thought. It's my original thought anyway. Maybe 20 million other people have already thought of it. But I thought about it when I was thinking, hey, I'm going to be talking to Auron today. This, with Tucker and Joe Rogan, they've interviewed Daryl Cooper, Martyr Made. They've interviewed Ian Carroll, and people's heads have exploded. And, you know, how dare someone hold a conversation about World War II, and was there some mistakes we might have made that have impacted us for the next 80 years? Can't have that discussion. And anybody that hosts people that want to have that discussion, they need to be canceled as well. And for me as a Christian and as an old person, I'm older than you and TJ, I'm 57. I've lived a long time, and I was, as a journalist, I was at the tail end of the newspaper industry when it actually had influence. That was my high time in the newspaper industry. But I saw Phil Donahue and people on TV interview Louis Farrakhan and David Duke and just all kinds of people that, you know, weren't politically correct and had all kinds of thoughts that were stupid and silly and bigoted. But we survived all that. And then, so I look today and go, Daryl Cooper, he's a bridge too far. And what baffles me as a Christian is that every conservative that I know would probably be comfortable having an abortion doctor on their show and debating the abortion with them. So a man or a woman whose job it is to slaughter babies in the womb is more fit for a platform than someone who thinks Winston Churchill may have been undisciplined in his approach to World War II. You can kill babies for a living and be worthy of a platform. But if you question Winston Churchill in World War II, you're unworthy of a platform. That baffles me.
Yeah, it's amazing the number of things that the conservative movement will forgive. We have a number of prominent conservative activists with, how do I say this, colorful pasts, especially in very leftist ways. And you know what? That's okay. At the end of the day, people change. They make new decisions. They can be forgiven. They can, that's fine. But for some reason, they can have prominent positions, and that's never a problem. But like you said, having Daryl on is too much. And by the way, I've known Daryl for a good while. I've had him on multiple times on my show, both before and after the Tucker incident. And the funny thing about the whole Daryl Cooper blow up is if you have ever listened to anything Daryl has put together, if you've actually talked to Daryl, you know that everything they're saying about this guy is a lie. Daryl has admitted at times that he is overreached. He has, put out some spicy posts, or he has made a joke maybe when he shouldn't have. But overall, if you look at his work in context, you can see that this is a man who cares deeply about basically all people who are oppressed and goes into great detail, for instance, to talk about the horrors of the pogroms and leading up to the Holocaust and all these things. These are huge parts of his podcast, the amount of pain that laborers had to go through in the United States, the Jim Crow South, and the way that blacks were treated. These are things he goes into very serious depth in during his podcast. And yet he was put up as some kind of Nazi sympathizer, some radical. It's comical when you know what a bleeding heart this guy is, and then you pretend that he's Satan. And ultimately, I think it's really important for people who have some kind of nuanced and outside opinion to be ignored, because if I think you talk about all these controversial people who used to be on television without it being a big deal. There's a segment of Enoch Powell on the Dick Cavett show, and he's talking to Dick Cavett, and there's another professor next to him, and it's very clear very quickly that Dick Cavett can't keep pace. But Enoch Powell is brilliant, and so is the professor, and they're coming from two different sides, and they're actually having a very interesting discussion. And that's the kind of stuff you don't want, I guess. Like, everyone's supposed to be a cartoon villain. We can't have two intelligent people from very different points of view having a discussion and enlightening us on why they hold those views. We need everything to be a cartoon. So everything from World War II to the Civil Rights Movement to the Civil War to the modern woke agenda, it's all just one cartoon. It can only look one way. You can only believe one thing about it. You certainly don't want educated, thoughtful people having deep discussions on this, because if you do, people might recognize there's more to learn and understand.
I think you hit on a couple really important things, Jason, in your question. One of them is that by extension, the people on the right are actually calling for censorship, because they pretend that they're just saying, hey, how dare you lend your platform to this conspiracy theorist? And then that turns into, how dare you let a conspiracy theorist have a platform, and how dare those people exist at all, right? I mean, that is really, ultimately, they're calling for censorship. And what happens when they're right? Because we do have Alex Jones, I think, open to correction on this, on tape calling 9/11 before it happened. I'm pretty sure that exists. And so when you see guys starting to be right, there's some stuff you got to throw out, but there's also some stuff that you can try to figure out. How did they know these things? Where are they right? Where are they asking the right questions? And the reality is, and this should be an insult to the audience, and again, why I think sometimes the Daily Wire struggles, not to throw too many stones at them, but they think the audience is too stupid to figure this out themselves. That's the reality. They're censoring for them, and they think the audience is too stupid to parse through what's true, what's not true, and you can't just have open dialogue for everybody to figure out themselves.
The one, and Auron, you tell me if you agree, the audience used to be too stupid to figure things out. And that's true. I mean, America tolerated the Kennedy assassination. Now I know I read somewhere where in Ben Shapiro's defense of, well, it really doesn't matter who killed JFK. He wrote up some short little column where he said that only 52% of Americans believe that there was a conspiracy to kill JFK in 1964. And so he used the word only. and that's what threw me. Half the country, he's saying, thought it was a conspiracy in 1964. That's a big number. And so, yeah, half the country was, in my view, stupid. But again, this is where I think and I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, but the consequences of Trump are so enormous. And when he releases the JFK files, basically saying, hey, you guys that have thought something screwy was going on, you're right, and I'm going to release the files. And he's just legitimized all of our questions and has inspired all of us that actually are inquisitive, want to understand America, and actually have a sincere desire to improve America and make it more fair. He's deputized and legalized all of us, and that's the reason why when he says things that I don't like in tweets or, doesn't come off as presidential as I'd want him to, I'm willing to forgive it all because he's allowing us to ask the questions that are necessary for a healthy constitutional republic that adheres to a constitution that's biblically based. And at the end of the day, that's my only agenda is I want more God in the country and the way we operate because that's what the founders intended.
One of the things I focus on my show is an area of political science called elite theory. And basically the focus is on how ruling elites manipulate opinion and, move the levers of power. And I think most people would probably recognize that in a large scale government, when you got 350 million people, there's going to be some need for mediating institutions. We can't just have everyone all the time, figuring out every aspect of our foreign policy, health, all these different things. There has to be some level of consensus to operate your civilization. But that's why you really, really, really need to invest heavily in the credibility of those institutions. Those institutions need to be above the board. They need to be serving the people. They need to be infused with the shared moral vision that has to come from the Christian religion because it's the foundation of the American experience. And if you don't have that and you lose the credibility of those institutions, things get bad quickly. And I think that's what a lot of people on the left and some of the people on the right that we're talking about here are concerned about, that the collapse of the credibility of those institutions puts the entire program that they're invested in a bad place. And I understand that. I mean, you look at Alex Jones. Alex Jones says a lot of things. Some of them turned out to be very true. Some of them turned out to be very false. But the fact that Alex Jones questions everything, and the fact that our regime for a very long time was run by evil people who lied to us constantly, means that if you disagree or challenge the regime all of the time, then you're going to have a pretty good batting average just on accident. Like without knowing anything one way or another, you will just be right a decent amount of time because the people involved are lying and evil. And if you say they're wrong, you will be right a good amount of time. Now, does that make for an overall good social strategy? Do you want everyone questioning every truth at every moment? Do you want every institution to have no credibility? No. But when we're in a moment where all of our institutions had been taken over by people who truly did not share our values and wished harm, I think ultimately on America, questioning these things just has to happen. It's not ideal, but it's necessary. And so I understand this moment is scary for a lot of these people, but ultimately we're going through a transition that needs to happen. These old institutions that have completely burned out their credibility needed to be questioned. They needed, in many cases, to be dismantled, and new ones need to be formed. We're in this moment, hopefully, where we are forging new institutions, where maybe a network like the Blaze can be a place where people regularly go and feel like those conversations are good, they are grounded, they are aligned with the values that they ultimately support. But that has to happen. And if we don't go through that pain, then we won't fix the problem. I understand this scares a number of conservatives who are very invested in the current system, but it just has to happen, or we will never free ourselves from the progressive control that comes through the media, academia, and these other opinion manufacturing institutions.
Auron, we'll end on this note, and this question encompasses far more than the Daily Wire. Do you think that any conservative media company brand will be able to survive 5 years from now, 3 years from now, if they're not America first, if they're not a bit nationalistic, if they're not willing to ask politically incorrect conversations, if they're not willing to expand the Overton window out to a place where you can maintain some credibility. And so this goes beyond the Daily Wire, but I'm asking for a bit of a prediction. Do you think the Daily Wire recovers, or is their brand in irreparable condition?
Well, they really have to ask the question, did they want to replace Fox News, or do they want to be something different, right? Because that's why a number of companies like the Daily Wire and Blaze and others existed. You had Fox News, but so many people recognized kind of the controlled nature of the conversation that was often happening there, that they wanted people to break out and have larger conversations. I think that's why many of these organizations have the level of audience that they have. But if you eschew that model and you say, ultimately, what I really wanted to do was just become the next place that controls the opinion, the next place that limits the conversation, the next place that ultimately decides what people are thinking or saying, then I think you're going to run into a problem, because that groundswell, that desire to have these conversations, to explore these issues, and ultimately really to have that level of authenticity is key. I think the hosts that are performing the best at the Daily Wire are the ones that are felt to be the most authentic, but I think that's true across all of the platforms, Blaze, Fox News, everything. I think authenticity is the currency that is really increasing in value at the moment. That's why people want to listen to Joe Rogan have 3-hour conversations with these people. That's why they want to listen to Tucker Carlson in these long form interviews, because they want to explore these issues. And if you're unwilling to do that, if you're looking for tight, controlled messaging that never allows people to ask these questions and hear different opinions and have this room to grow, I think you will run into a serious problem. I think it will ultimately hurt any media organization that embraces that strategy.
Auron, thank you so much. I hope you're willing to return. Awesome job. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. That's Auron MacIntyre, our colleague here at the Blaze. I enjoyed that. You got any final thoughts here, TJ?
No, he's good. It's nice hearing from, there are reasonable people. There aren't that many, but occasionally you get to talk to them, and they're doing the same stuff on their show. We do feel like, not so much of the Blaze, because there's some people with some courage here, but you could pop from show to show to show, and everybody's saying the same thing with very little courage. The last thing that he said in the question you asked, I think, is important, and it's very obvious to people who spend any time in media. You will not survive long term without having authentic conversations, because now that we're in the wild, wild west of conversation, thanks in large part to Elon Musk and what Twitter's allowed and asking the real questions, then when you sit and listen to Jason Whitlock talk to Auron MacIntyre for 30 minutes and have a real conversation, how then do you go back to listening to Jesse Waters talk to somebody manufactured and they're having this conversation that was all set up by the people funding them? It's just not interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't taste the same. It was like, I used to love Applebee's, and then someone took me to Ruth Chris, and I quit going to Applebee's. And, not that I'm anti-Applebee's. I can still have a good meal there, but I just don't enjoy it the same. And it's like, if I'm forced, I'll eat at Applebee's. And that is, I think, when you watch Joe Rogan's conversations, when you watch Tucker Carlson's conversations, hopefully when you watch Fearless or anything we do, you're like, man, they are addressing everything. And I know there'll be some people watching this go, are you really addressing everything, Jason? You won't say that 3-letter word. And I'm like, well, yes, we do. But
have you heard of E. Michael Jones?
it's we try to cover it all. We try to cover it in a respectful way, in a fair way. And I think I'm just clear as day, from black people to black women to the Jews to Hispanics to feminists. If it don't line up with Jesus Christ, we'll talk about it. We'll point a finger at the that doesn't line up with it. And I just honestly think that's where America's gotten so chaotic and so dysfunctional and so degenerate that even the secular, even the atheists are like, man, we need some more Jesus. And so it's actually a good time to be alive in America.
And Jesus is the truth, right? I mean, that is like when you're seeking the truth, you're actually seeking Jesus. That is the reality. I'm the way, the truth, John 14:6. And so as people are looking for authentic conversation, that is part of the problem with censoring. Like, people are looking for truth, and you're depriving them of that. And if they look for truth for long enough, they will find Jesus. That's how it works. If you're actually authentically looking for these things. And so that is the part, again, not to hammer too hard the Daily Wire and whatever else, but the legacy media, the people who say you can't ask real questions and you can't, how dare you ask that question? The word should never come out of your mouth. I'm offended by that question. Ever, ever, ever. You should be able to ask anything. It might be a stupid question. I've asked a lot of stupid questions, but then give me the answer.
So, Luke, Justin, anybody watching this, let's make sure we cut out, and I'm ending the show saying this, make sure we cut out the conversation with the point I made about, like, hey, man, you can be an abortion doctor, and everybody will platform you. You can be pro-abortion. Everybody will platform you. Again, you can be pro-baby murder. You can be a drag queen, and most people will platform you, and no one will bat an eye. But, man, you question World War II. You question Winston Churchill, and you don't deserve a platform. How did we get here? How did we get here where someone that slaughters babies is more worthy of a platform than someone who wants to question a historical narrative?
It's settled science, Jason.
Yeah.
The science is settled.
Anyway, that's it, and that's all for us today. Hope you enjoyed the conversation about LeBron and his interview with Pat McAfee. Hope you loved the conversation we just had with Auron MacIntyre. And we'll play tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Waiting for the countdown, coming off the breakdown, standing in line for freedom. Looking for a breakout, feeling like a standoff, nothing in life like freedom. Came in like a fighter, striking like a ladder, making all this moves for freedom. I want freedom. No negotiation, my system, no relation. We all just wanna have freedom.